Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Nun Zayin. Yesterday we saw the classic Braita that lists the Sheva Mitzvot B'nei Noach as they are usually listed and brought sources for them. But then at the end of the Daf we saw that there is another Tana, Debe Menashe, that has a different list in that he takes out Dinim and Birkat Hashem. Those are not part of the seven Mitzvot B'nei Noach, and he adds Sirus and Kilayim. And so now we're going to see that Braita and analyze it and bring sources for this. The Tana de Menashe, Sheva Mitzvot Nistavu B'nei Noach. They agree that there's 7 mitzvot, but here's a different listing: Avodah Zarah, Vegilui Arayot, Ushvichut Amim, Gezel, Ve'evi Menachai, Serus, Ve'kilayim. The first 5 are the same: idolatry and forbidden relations, and murder, and stealing and eating a live limb, a limb from a live animal, and castration of an animal, and kilayim is mixing together diverse kinds of species of animals or grafting plants. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Adam Rishon lo nistava ela al avodah zara bilvad, shene'emar vaysav Adonai Elohim al ha'adam. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that Adam Rishon was only given one commandment regarding idolatry, and we know that from the pasuk that says that Hashem Elokim commanded Adam. Now the rest of the pasuk is talking about what he can eat and not eat from the tree. However, if we just take this part alone, the point is Hashem Elokim commanded regarding Hashem Elokim. So this means you cannot have any other gods, you cannot worship any other gods. So this pasuk, or half pasuk taken on its own, is a law about idolatry. And so originally Adam Rishon and all his descendants would be prohibited from idolatry alone. And that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara med afal b'rkat Hashem. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara says, there's different Rabbi Yehuda. And there's also against is included as the prohibition of cursing Hashem. Also from this pasuk, as we'll see in a second, and others say that also from this same pasuk, one can learn that Adam was commanded regarding dinim. That is not necessarily in conflict with what we had over here about Sheva Mitzvot, because that's for Bnei Noach. So it could be that Adam Rishon was given these 1, 2, or 3, and then Noach completing the list until the 7. Keman azlahad amarav Yehuda amarav Elohim ani lo tikaleluni Elohim ani lo timiruni Elohim ani yemori alechem keman ki yeshomrim. And so whose opinion of these Tanaim does the following statement follow that was said by Rav? It says Elohim ani, therefore you may not curse me. I am God, and therefore you may not exchange me for another and follow idolatry. I am God, and therefore my fear should be upon you. And fear of God means doing the right thing in terms of more ethics and laws regarding judgment, civil laws. So who is this like? It's like Yesh Shomrim. So what you see here is that Yesh Shomrim is following up and adding to the Yehuda, Ben Betara is adding to the Yehuda, and you can derive all 3 of these from the fact that Hashem Elokim commands Adam. And the point is he's commanding him, I am God, right? Even whatever he says, the point is he is a commander. And so once you say, I am God, I am your God, so that comes with the all the implications of, therefore, you may not curse, you may not exchange and follow idolatry, and fear of God means having courts of judgment, and so all these 3 are included in this, and that's the opinion of Rav, and Rav would be following Yesh Shomrim that has all these 3. Tana de Menashe, idarish vaysav afilu hanachname, iladarish vaysav hane minale. Now we want to know the source for all the 7 for the Tana de Menashe. We saw that, okay, from one pasuk, Vaysav, you could learn 3 of them here, but what about the rest of them? And so we're asking if he follows this derasha that Rabbi Yehuda said regarding the pasuk Vaysav. We saw a different derasha on this pasuk above that says each word is talking about another one. But here we have another way of explaining Vaysav. If the Tana Kama agrees with Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation of Vaysav, then he should add, well, Avodah Zarah is already in his list, but Birkat Hashem is not on the list, and Dinim is not in his list. And so if you agree with Vaysav, then Tanakama should also include Birkat Hashem and Dinin. In fact, in the original list before, also includes Birkat Hashem and Dinin, and learns it in one way or another from Vaysav. So if you're going to learn things from Vaysav, then you should include these also. And if he does not learn Vaysav, then where does he derive all the mitzvot on his list? You could derive these in some way, right, from the original way we learned Vaisav, plus this one. And so, but this list is a new list and includes a couple of new things. So what is his derivation for all the things on his list? And the answer is Lo'olam la darish Vaisav. He does not learn anything from the pasuk of Vaisav. Hane kol chada v'chada be'apeh nafsheh ketiba. But rather, this list of 7 from Be'er Menashe, each one has its own pasuk, as we will see. Avodah zara v'gilui arayot ichtib v'tishacha et haaretz lifnei Elohim. Regarding idolatry and forbidden relations, it says, referring to the generation of the flood, that the earth was corrupt before God. Now, corrupt in what way? What kind of transitions did they do? Let's see. V'tana deber b'Ishmael b'chol makom shene'emar hashchata eno ela debar irva ve'avodah zara. Anytime you say the word hashchata, and that's the word vatishachet, it became corrupt. That is, in fact, referring to forbidden relations and idolatry. How do you know? Devar arva shene'emar ki hishchit kol basar et darko. We see that the word hashchata refers to forbidden relations from the pasuk right after the one that we just quoted says that all flesh corrupted its way. Darko is a reference to relations. And so this is forbidden relations. So we see that the word hashchata refers to that. And also, avodah zara, dichti pen trashitum v'asitem lachem pesel. And Devarim says, do not become corrupt and make graven images. And so the word tashchitun is spoken about in relation to avodah zara. And therefore, when it says that the generation of the flood was corrupt, they were violating these two prohibitions and they got destroyed. So obviously they're not allowed to do them. If they were allowed to do them, then they wouldn't get any punishment for it. So that's how we learned that Bnei Noach are prohibited in avodah zarah and forbidden relations. Ve'idach. And how about the other opinion that learns everything from the pasuk Vaisav that we saw yesterday? What will they do with this pasuk? Because they already have a derivation. So what, this one is extra? And the answer is Orchaihu deka megale. No, it's explaining the behavior of the generation of the flood. They were destroyed and deserved to be destroyed because this is what they did. But it's descriptive, not prescriptive. We know that they're not allowed from the pasuk Vaisav. And now it says, look, they did this and they did that. So these are the counts by which they are guilty. Shefichut damim dichtib shofech dam ha'adam begomer. Okay, this is an easy one that, Bnei Noach are not allowed to murder because it says to Noach that anyone who sheds the blood of man by man, his blood will be shed. Any murderer gets capital punishment. Okay, so that's the easy one. Ve'idach, now the other opinion that learned everything from Vaisav, how come they don't learn it from here? And the answer is Ketalayuhu deka megale. No, this pasuk is only telling you the type of death penalty that they get for bloodshed. So ba'adam, we're going to see soon, is a reference to chenek. That's the standard punishment for non-Jews for violating Sheva mitzvot Bnei Noach. And so it's just telling you the punishment, but the prohibition we know from Vaisav. Gezer dichtib ki yerek ahesev natati lachem et kol. We know that non-Jews are prohibited in robbery because the pasuk says to Noach, from now on you can eat animals like green herbs. Beforehand, Adam was prohibited from eating all animals, and he could only eat green herbs. And so now the Torah says you can eat animals and compares it to green herbs. V'amar Rabbi Levi ki yerek ahesev v'lo ki rak gina. And Rabbi Levi makes a diuk that says you can eat them like green herbs, but not like vegetables of a garden. Generally, green herbs grow by themselves anywhere, and they're ownerless, so you can take them. But vegetables of a garden, that belongs to someone, so you cannot take vegetables of a garden that belongs to someone. And so from here we learn that robbery is not allowed even to non-Jews. And the other opinion that learns this from Vaisav will say, no, this pasuk is just coming to tell you that animals are permitted. And it's just comparing animals to green herbs. And the fact is that to Adam it was said, you can eat everything, right? You can eat herbs, anything that grows. And so now it's just saying that animals, you're also allowed to eat like that, whatever Adam was allowed to eat. But it's not coming to exclude vegetables. And so there's you can't derive from here that's necessarily coming to exclude vegetables of a garden. really the main point of this pasuk is to permit meat. Ever min achai dichtib ach basad benafsho damo lo tochelu. And how do we know that a non-Jew is prohibited from eating a limb from a live animal? Because it says in the pasuk that said to Noach that flesh that comes from nafsho damo, a live being that has the blood of life force in it. That means a flesh from a live animal, one is not allowed to eat. So that's pretty clear. So we ask v'idach, the other opinion that we saw yesterday that says that learns everything from Vaisav, including Ever Menachai. What will they do with this pasuk that seems to be extra? They actually use this pasuk to permit Ever Menachai from Shirasim. They say that Ever Menachai is prohibited from animals, and animals are understood to have a soul and have a life force in its blood. But creepy crawlies don't. Even if they have blood, their blood is permitted. And a limb from a live creepy crawly is permitted, because only if it's benafsho, damo, if it has the life force in a blood, it has a soul, it's understood to be a higher level living being that applies to animals, it does not apply to creepy crawlies, and so they use this pasuk actually for a leniency. Serus tichtib shirsu ba'aris urbu ba. What's the source that castration is prohibited to bnei Noach? Because the pasuk says to Noach that you should be fruitful and multiply, swarm in the earth and multiply in it. So you're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. You and animals and everything should spread, and if you perform castration, then it won't be able to swarm and multiply. V'idach, and the other Tana that does not even list serus, castration, as one of his b'nei Noach, what will they do with this pasuk? And the answer is libracha be'alma. This pasuk is not a commandment, but rather it's a blessing. May you be fruitful and multiply. I hope you do. But if you don't want to, if you want to perform castration, well, then you can, but you won't get the beracha, obviously, but it's not a prohibition. Kilayim, how do we know? According to Tana de Menashe, that kilayim is prohibited. Dichtib me'ha'of leminehu. Says, take each one of the birds of its kind and bring them into the ark. And so it says each of its kind, meaning keep them all separate and don't mix one species with another. V'idach, and the original baraita that does not count kilayim as one of mitzvot b'nei Noach. What do they do with this pasuk? Ha'u l'savta be'alma. This is just for companionship. Listen, when they go in the ark, they're going to want to be with a companion, a male and a female. They like to be together with each other, so we'll bring them in together so that they have companionship. But it's not a prohibition against mixing diverse species. V'amar Rav Yosef, Amri be'erav, al shalosh mitzvot ben Noach neherag, al gidlui arayot v'shfichut amim v'al birkat Hashem. Okay, so now that we have these two lists, and now Rav Yosef says that from the school of Rav teaches that regarding 3 of the mitzvot of Bnei Noach, Ben Noach is given capital punishment, but only these 3. Which ones? For forbidden relations, for murder, and for cursing the name of God. So Rav Sheshat challenges it, says, I understand regarding murder, it says explicitly, someone who sheds the blood of man, by man, meaning by a court, his blood will be shed, so he gets capital punishment. But the others 2, what would be your source? If you're going to learn everything from murder, as binyan av, here it says regarding murder that they get capital punishment, and so too we learn from that to the others of Giloy Arayot and Birkat Hashem. Well, then why stop there? And then you should learn to all 7 of them that a non-Jew, we know a punishment for one of them, so we can extrapolate a punishment for all of them. But Rav Yosef doesn't say that. And if the Tana is learning from the double language of ish that it says regarding the other 2, besides Shivchut Amim, Gilui Arayot and Birkat Hashem, in both of them it says a double language ish. We see that here. From here we learn that not only a Jew but also a non-Jew who curses the name of God will bear his sin and will get capital punishment. And also we learn ish et kol she'besarot lo tikrul galot erva ani Adonai. regarding forbidden relations, it says a double language, ish. And so that's how we learn that for Giloi Arayot, also a non-Jew is prohibited and gets capital punishment. So is that how Rav Yosef is learning these three? But that doesn't make sense, because if so, Avodah Zarah also, there's a pasuk that says, that's a form of Avodah Zarah, Mot Yumat. And so it says ish over here also to say Jew and non-Jew get the same punishment, capital punishment. So then you should include also Avodah Zarah if you're learning from the double language. Ela amar Rav Sheshat amri berav al arba misvot ben Noach neherag. And therefore Rav Sheshat disputes Rav Yosef's version of what they said in the school of Rav, and he says no, what they actually said is all four. And so therefore we're learning it directly from we know murder directly from this pasuk and all the other pasukim that say ish. And so that would be 4 mitzvot for which a non-Jew is given capital punishment. Aval avodah zarah ben Noach neherag, and now we challenge that. Is that really true that for idolatry, Ben Noach will be killed? V'hatanya ba'avodah zarah devrim shebet din shel Yisrael memitin alehem Ben Noach muzhad alehen azara'in mitala. There's a braita that says regarding idolatry, whatever a bet din of a Jew would kill a Jew for doing, Ben Noach is only warned about it. And so there's a warning here. You can even say a prohibition, but it's prohibited, but not given the death penalty. A lighter penalty, but not the death penalty. So this disputes Rav Sheshat. And the answer is Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak azhara shelahen zohi mitatan. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak answers, but that's useful to explain the challenge against Rav Sheshat, that a prohibition for a non-Jew is also the death penalty. The idea is that azhara usually means a warning, and if it's for the mitzvot in the Torah that apply to a Jew, you need both a warning and a punishment. You actually need 2 pesukim. And that's because most of them are not obvious. Like, how would I know that Shabbat is prohibited? It's not something you could come up with on your own, or the non-kosher animals and so on. And so you need a pasuk to say this is not allowed, and then a pasuk to tell us the warning. However, for Mitzvot Bnei Noach, those are more or less obvious basic things that you can come up with on your own. And therefore, if there's a warning that says this is prohibited, then automatically it gets the death penalty. We don't need a warning and a death penalty for Mitzvah Bnei Noach that are all reasonable and obvious. Rav Una v'Rav Yehuda kulu tamidei de Rav Amreh al sheva mitzvot ben Noach neherag. However, other sages, Rav Huna, and the other students of Rav, they say no, it's not 3 or 4, but rather all 7 of the mitzvot Bnei Noach get capital punishment. And in fact, they say we learn from murder. Over there it says shofech dam ba'adam damo yishafech, and that's one of the mitzvot ben Noach, and he gets capital punishment. And from there we learn as a paradigm to all 7 get capital punishment. We challenge that. Val hagezel ben Noach neherag. Hold on, is that true that a ben Noach will be killed for stealing? V'hatanya al hagezel ganav v'gazal v'chen yefat toar v'chen kayose bahen nochri benochri v'nochri b'Yisrael asur v'Yisrael benochri mutar v'imita nitne chayav. There's a braita that teaches regarding stealing, if someone ganav, that's someone who steals at night when no one's looking, they sneak in and take someone. Gezel is stealing, just taking something out in the open. These 2 laws, and also yefat toar, going taking a beautiful woman during war, and kayotze bahen. We'll see what this means. Other laws that are like this, if a non-Jew does it to a non-Jew, or a non-Jew steals or takes a yefat toar from a Jew, that is prohibited. And if a Jew does it to a non-Jew, then it's permitted. I know we're saying that for a Jew it's permitted to steal from a non-Jew. There is a big dispute about this, and the Meiri is very important here. He says this is only talking about back in the time when non-Jews had no morality in their society. So then they allow stealing from each other. Everything's allowed. So if you're living in a place of total anarchy, Wild West, then you can follow their own rules of stealing. However, Meiri says this does not apply to any non-Jewish civilization that has laws and proper idea morality. So then this law would not apply. So when it says nochri, it's a specific time and place, not just anywhere and any time. And basically, Meiri says it does not apply anymore, not even to his own time or our time either. Okay, in any case, here it says that stealing from a non-Jew, stealing from a non-Jew, it says asur. Now, if it was capital punishment, then it would say chayav, right? Asur just means it's not allowed, but not punishable. Chayav is what it means when you want to say punishable. So how come it doesn't say chayav? And we answer, mishum asur. We need it to be parallel, since the continuations over here says that if a Jew does this to a non-Jew, mutar. See, so the opposite of mutar is asur. So you can't just go say chayav and mutar. Those two words don't go together. You could say chayav and patur, and then there would be a Jew to a non-Jew patur, but that's not really true, because actually is mutar according to this baraita. And so when you say this is permitted, so as a parallel it says asur, not permitted. But in fact, really, it's true that it's chayav, and a non-Jew gets capital punishment for stealing. Hold on, you can't say that, because the beginning of this, the first part of this very Mishnah baraita that we didn't see yet, in fact says chayav when it means capital punishment, because the beginning of it says al shafichut amim nochri benochri v'nochri b'Yisrael chayav Yisrael benochri patur. Says regarding bloodshed, murder, if a non-Jew kills another non-Jew or a non-Jew kills a Jew, then chayav, that means capital punishment. See, it says the word chayav when it means capital punishment. A Jew to a non-Jew, patur. If a Jew kills a non-Jew, patur. Okay, we have to put this in the same category as we said before, if you're living in a totally lawless society, living under Nazi Germany or something like that. Anyway, hatam hechi litneh. So doesn't this prove that in fact when it says, when you want to say capital punishment, means chayav, and here it didn't say chayav, so that means there's no capital punishment. Challenge again to the opinion that says that for stealing there is capital punishment for a non-Jew. So we answer, well, in this case, what do you want it to say? Litne asur mutar v'atanya nochri v'ro'eh behemad lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. If you would have it say asur and mutar, that a non-Jew kills a non-Jew, asur, prohibited, and a Jew who kills a non-Jew, mutar, permitted, but that isn't true, because there's another baraita that says regarding a non-Jew and the shepherds of small livestock who were considered robbers because they let the livestock go and take from other people. Lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. We don't lower them into a pit. We don't actively kill them. But if, let's say, they fall into a pit and they're saying, help, help, don't help them, don't bring them up. So you can passively kill them, but not actively kill them. So therefore, you cannot say here asur and mutar, because mutar means allowed to kill them. And that would just be false. So therefore, you have to say patur regarding the second part of Yisrael benochri. You can't say mutar, it's only patur. Like passively, you could do it. So therefore, once you say patur, the parallel to that is chayav. So really, both of these parts of the baraita are following the second part, Yisrael benochri. Here it says mutar, so therefore in the first part we'll say sur. And here we want to say patur, because that's the law, and therefore in the beginning we say chayav. But really you can't tell anything from the fact that over here it says chayav, and over here it doesn't say chayav, it just says asur. Really, in fact, it's chayav here as well if a non-Jew steals from anyone. Next, we ask about the word kayosebo. Before we said that Bnei Noach are also prohibited in Gezel and Eshet Yefat To'ad, ve'kayotsebo. So what does it mean other cases that are like this but are not exactly this? So what's a case that's similar to stealing but not exactly stealing? Maihi. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov lo nisrachel lepoel bekerem. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, talking about a worker in a vineyard who, according to the Torah, is allowed to eat while he is working, while he's picking some of the fruit and putting it in the basket, he's allowed to taste some of the fruit. And so that would be considered something that's not exactly stealing, but like stealing. We ask about this. Well, when is he taking this fruit? If it's when the fruit is done, it's ripe and it's being harvested, that's permitted to a Jew and a non-Jew. It's not called stealing. That's the law, that you're allowed to eat from what you're working on when it's ready. gezel ma'aliyahu. And if it's not ripe and not ready, and just going and taking it, not at the time of harvest, then that is outright stealing. That's not something that's like stealing. It just is stealing. So we need another candidate. Ela marapapa lo nisracha ela lepachot mishave peruta. So the papa says no. When it says kayotzebo, it's talking about someone who steals an amount that's very small, less than a peruta, less than the smallest denomination in the currency. So that you can't call it outright theft, because how much did he steal? Oh, I can't even write the number. It's less than a penny. Well, you can't write the number. However, it's kayotzebo. It is like stealing, and therefore that is included in the prohibition against a non-Jew. So a non-Jew who steals less than a peruta from a non-Jew or from a Jew will get capital punishment, whereas a Jew who steals from another Jew would not. The idea that a Jew that steals from another Jew would not get any punishment at all is based on the assumption that the victim will waive what he lost. Okay, what'd you steal? Like a paper clip? Okay, forget about it. No one's ever going to bring someone to court for that, since they just forgive it. So then it's not stealing anymore when it comes to a Jew against a Jew. But non-Jews, the idea is that, at least in those days, were more stingy and would bring someone to court and sue someone even for less than a peruta. So now we ask, wait a second, if a non-Jew steals from a Jew, why would you say that that's prohibited and would even be punishable? But since they're stealing from a Jew, and the Jew forgoes his right to the fact that someone stole from him, and he doesn't care, so then it's not stealing anymore, so then the non-Jew should not be killed. And the answer is okay, it's true that afterwards he says, okay, forget about it, I'm not going to bring him to court, but still at the time that he realizes that someone stole his bobby pin from him, does he not have distress? I can't believe he stole it, I needed that one. And then he stole it. So since he has distress, so it is called a crime, and therefore, since a non-Jew gets capital punishment for stealing, therefore there would be capital punishment. So even though it's not, you can't call it outright stealing because it's less than a peruta, nevertheless, if a non-Jew does it, they get capital punishment. Hold on, a non-Jew against a non-Jew says something similar to it, and in this case it would be less than the sheveh peruta. Since non-Jews are not forgiving regarding this, then you can't call it like robbery. Actually is robbery. So what that it's a small amount? Still, if you're taking it and the victim cares about it, and they do care about it, then it's outright stealing. So now we need another candidate for this category. We're talking about a case that someone withholds the wages of a hired laborer. It doesn't pay the person on time. That's not outright stealing, because eventually he's going to pay him, but he doesn't pay him at the right time. So that is like stealing. If a non-Jew does it to a non-Jew, or a non-Jew is the boss paying a Jew, and he does this, it's prohibited, and that will be punishable. But if a Jew does it to a non-Jew, it's permitted, and that's the kayosebo, because it's not really stealing, it's just delaying the payment. Kayose bifat toar maihi. Now it says also regarding ifat toar, that is included in this category. That if a non-Jew does it, they get capital punishment. If a Jew does it, then to a non-Jew, then it's permitted. Yifat Torah is permitted in the Torah. So what would the case be of kayotzebo? That's something that's similar to Yifat Torah, but not exactly that. Ki atad avdimi amar bi Elazar amar bi Chanina ben Noach sheyiched shivcha leabdo uba aleha neherag aleha. Let's say you have a ben Noach who owns a shivcha and an eved, and so he designates a shivcha for his eved. He says, listen, Eved, you have this shivcha, they are designated kind of like marriage, but it's not really marriage for slaves, and therefore it's only that he is designating them to be together, then they'll have a family, and then the owner, the boss, comes and has relations with that shivcha. So this is similar to Yifat Torah, because just like Yifat Torah, you're in a war, and you win the war, so now you're in charge, and you can do whatever you want with the population that you conquer. And so now, what about the Eshet Yifat Torah? Okay, for a Jew that goes and conquers a non-Jewish nation, they're allowed in Yifat Torah. But the other way around is not allowed. And so this is similar because it's also a case where a non-Jew has full control over this other non-Jew, and he designates her to be with his Eved. That's it. Once she's designated for that person, then he goes and takes her for himself, like an Eshet Yefat Toar. That's a case that's similar to Eshet Yefat Toar, where it's not permitted, and if Ben Noach would do that, he would get capital punishment. Now the Braita never said that regarding murder, a case that's similar to bloodshed, also Ben Noach is killed. But even though the Braita doesn't say it, it's fun to think about, what if it did say it? Amar Abaye, imashkacha detanya, Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul hi, detanya, Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul omer, odef achad chavero lehorgo, ve'achol hasilo bechad evarav, ve'lo hisil, neherag alav. And so Abaye says, if we would find a Braita that said that a non-Jew is prohibited to murder and anything like it and gets capital punishment for it, what would be the thing that's like capital punishment, but not exactly capital punishment? It would be what Rabbi Natan ben Shaul says, because in Braita he teaches that if someone is pursuing someone to kill him, and the pursued person is certainly allowed to save himself. However, if the pursued one can stop the pursuer by injuring one of his limbs, and you could shoot him in the leg and stop him, but he doesn't do so and instead kills him, so that is called like murder, even though it's not exactly murder, outright murder, because he is killing a pursuer, which he's allowed to do, but nevertheless it's like murder because he could have stopped him otherwise, and then he stops him this way. So if a non-Jew does that to anyone, then that would also be called capital punishment. Ashkach Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha dehavaketi besefer Agadata debe Rav. Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha found that it was written in the book of Agadot, in the Bet Midrash. Ben Noach neherag bedayan echad u'ba'ed echad b'shelo b'tara b'pi ish velo mipi isha afilu karov mishum Rabbi Yishmael amiru af ala ubarin. Now, even though it's supposed to be in the Sefer Agadah, that is actually a halachic topic. Maybe it was a book of Derashot on Bereshit, so that's why it included some halacha on Bereshit. Okay, and whatever the case is, this book said, it's interesting, it's in a book, a scroll, it's written down. Generally, Torah Sheba'al Peh is not written down, and it was not written down during the times of the Tanaim and not during the time of the Amoraim. However, that it was particularly true for halacha. When it came to Agadah, we do have several references in the Talmud to a Sefer Agadah, that there were scrolls, and they did write down Agadah on scrolls. That was considered a different category, and the main prohibition against writing down Torah Sheba'al Peh was for halacha. Okay, anyway, it said in this scroll that a Ben Noach is killed with one judge and one witness, and even without a warning, and it has to be from the testimony of a man, but not the testimony of a woman is not acceptable, and even if it's a relative. In other words, the law of dinim, the laws of courts of Jews and non-Jews is not the same, even though non-Jews are required to have courts, but the requirement within the court procedure is not the same, and you can, in a non-Jewish court, they can give capital punishment even with one judge. You don't need 23, and even with one witness instead of two, and without warning. And this one is the same. It has to be a man, but not a woman. That's the same in Jewish and non-Jewish courts. But the fact that it can be a relative is true only in non-Jewish courts. And in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, they said also regarding a fetus, if someone aborts a fetus, if a Jew does it to a Jew, then there's no capital punishment. Doesn't mean it's permitted, but it's not considered capital punishment. It would be something else. Whereas if a non-Jew does an abortion, then they would get capital punishment, which is interesting. So this is one of those rare examples where the law for non-Jews is more stringent than the law would be for Jews. What is the source of these differences in court procedure? Amar Rav Yudad Amar Kera Achet Dimechem Lenafshotechem Edrosh Afilu Bedayan Ehad. Rav Yudad quotes this pasuk that's here in the context of the prohibition against murder to Bnei Noach. It says, Hashem says, I will require the blood of your lives, meaning if you kill someone, I'm going to punish that person. At the hand of an animal too. If an animal kills someone, it dies. Miyad ha'adam, miyad ish achiv. Humans also, a person against his brother, as Rosh Nefesh ha'adam, I will require the life of man, meaning that the murderer will have to pay with his own life. So this pasuk means, afilu b'dayan echad, since Hashem is speaking in singular, now it's true, it is talking about Hashem doing it, but the judge who adjudicates such a case is in a way standing in for God's justice. And since it says it in the singular, therefore it can be done even with one judge. Miyad kol chaya afilu shelo b'hatra'ah. It says from every animal. Now an animal is not going to be warned. You don't go tell a lion, hey, you better not do that or else. Right? It just does its thing. And therefore we see that warning is not required. Edreshenu umiyad ha'adam afilu be'ayed echad. And when it says by the hands of a man, this is referring to the witness, and it's in singular. So that means only one witness in a non-Jewish court is sufficient to convict someone. Miyad ish v'lo miyad isha, says from the hands of a man, and we learn from there, man but not a woman cannot be a valid witness. Achiv afilu karob, right? And the word achiv means even if it's a relative, that's okay. A relative can also be a witness in a non-Jewish court. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael amru afalo barin. My ta'amed Rabbi Yishmael dichtib shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam damo yishafech. Ezu adam shehu ba'adam heve omer zehu ba sheb'ma'imo. Rabbi Yishmael says also that non-Jews are liable to capital punishment for killing a fetus. And what's their source? Because the pasuk says, one who sheds the life of a man within a man, his blood will be shed. How can you have a man within a man? How could you have a person inside a person? The answer is a pregnant woman, right? A fetus is a person inside a person. So someone who sheds the blood of a fetus, that is a person inside a person, that person gets capital punishment of that murderer. And so we see this is to Ben Noach, and that's the source that abortion is considered murder for non-Jews. Vetanakama. Now the first opinion that Braita that disagrees with Rabbi Ishmael, how will they understand this pasuk? Doesn't it say shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam? Someone who kills a person within a person, meaning a fetus, gets capital punishment? But they disagree with that. So how do they explain this pasuk? Tana de be'menashehu de'amar kol mitamura libnei Noach eno ela chenek v'shadeh lehai ba'adam asefeh dikra udrosh be'hachi. So this is a Tana be'menashe who says that all capital punishments that are given to a ben Noach is only going to be chenek, it's always strangulation. And you derive it from this very pasuk, because you take this ba'adam, the second word, and you read it with the continuation of the pasuk, which is the natural way of reading it actually. So it's shofech dam ha'adam kama ba'adam damo yishafech. And this is what its meaning is. Udrosh behachi ba'adam damo yishafech. Ezehu shefichat damim shel adam shu begufo shel adam heve omer ze chenek. Ba'adam, meaning within the man, his blood will be shed. Well, how can you shed blood within the body of a man? I understand how you can shed blood outside of it. If you cut off someone's head, all their blood comes squirting out. So then their blood is shed outside their body. But how can you kill someone, shed their blood, yet no blood comes out? And the answer is strangulation, where the body stays intact, and yet the blood stops flowing. So the blood is shed, there's no life force in the blood anymore after strangulation. And so that's how we learn that all b'nei Noach is shofech dam ha'adam, kama ba'adam damo yishafech. You shed his blood, but it has to remain within the body. So they're only given capital punishment, and they're only given chenek, strangulation, and not any other type of capital punishment. Mativ Rav Hamnuna v'isha lami pakeda v'haketib ki yedativ laman asher v'gomer. Rav Hamnuna challenges, if a woman cannot be a witness or a judge in a non-Jewish court, then does that also mean that women are not commanded regarding making courts? And so they're excluded from the whole law of courts of the Sheva Mitzvot Ben Noach. But that can't be, because after all it says about Avraham, and Avraham is still one of Bnei Noach. This is before the Torah giving. And it says regarding Avraham, let's see the full pasuk. So Hashem says, I singled him out because he is going to command, or he already does command his banav, his sons, and beto acharav, Acharav, and his family after him. This is understood as Banav, his sons, male, and Beto means his daughters, right? That's as opposition to sons. They will follow the way of Hashem to do tzedakah umishpat. So right here it says mishpat, and it's including daughters. So therefore, daughters must be included in the laws of dinim. Hu motiv lav hu mefarek la. Rav Hamnuna asked the question, and he also answers it. Banav lidin, beto listaka. When it says banav, that is referring to judgment, and beto is for tzedakah. In other words, it does say banav and beto, and we are understanding that as sons and daughters. However, we're splitting these two words so that banav is referring to mishpat. So the sons are commanded regarding dinin, and beto is referring to daughters, but daughters are commanded regarding tzedakah, regarding giving charity, and so we can explain that pasuk. Amar le Rav Avya Sava le Rav Papa, Ema bat Noach sheharga lo tehareg miyad ish velo miyad isha ketihib. Similar question Rav Avya Sava asked Rav Papa. So should we say that a bat Noach, a non-Jewish woman who commits murder, should not get capital punishment because the pasuk that we saw up above says miyad ish, from the hand of a man? God says, I will give punishment, I will require compensation, but not from the hand of a woman. So that means a woman who murders does not get capital punishment. And so he said, no, I could learn from what Rav Yehuda says, that we learn from shofech dam hadam, anyone, man or woman, who spills the blood of a man will get capital punishment. So that's how we learn that women also get capital punishment for murder. Should we propose that a non-Jewish woman who commits adultery should not get capital punishment because it says, therefore, this is after Adam creates Chava out of Adam's rib or side. He says, therefore, therefore a person should leave his father and mother and cling to his wife and become one flesh. So it says that a man leaves his father and mother and becomes one flesh, and not a woman. So a man becomes one flesh, so he's prohibited from committing adultery and will get capital punishment. But the woman who commits adultery will not get capital punishment. Should we say that? It's true, even though the beginning of the pasuk says, therefore a man should leave his parents and go cling to his wife. Once they cling together, they become basar ehad. And so the continuation of the pasuk then combines them into one, which means just as a man becomes one with his wife, so too a wife becomes one with her husband. And this is all referring to non-Jews, and therefore a non-Jewish woman who commits adultery also gets capital punishment. Tenor banan ish, matamud ish ish, lerabot et hagoyim shemuzharin al arayot ki Yisrael. Regarding the pasuk of forbidden relations that we quoted above, that says ish ish back to back. So ish, I know that just from one word, I know ish that Jews are not allowed. So why does it say double ish? That comes to include non-Jews also. They are prohibited regarding prohibited relations. Wait, why do you have to bring a proof from this pasuk in Vayikra? Didn't we learn all on yesterday's daf from the continuation in Vaysav that in the pasuk in the beginning of Bereshit it says the word lemor was connected to a pasuk in Yirmiyah, and that referred to Gilui Arayot. So you already know that non-Jews cannot perform Gilui Arayot. Why do I need this double ish? Hatam ba'arayot idhu, hacha ba'arayot didan. Oh, that pasuk in Bereshit is talking about their relations. In other words, a non-Jew committing adultery with another non-Jew who's married to someone else. But this pasuk ish is referring to our arayot, a non-Jew who would commit adultery with a Jewish woman, and let's say a non-Jewish man who has adultery with a woman, a Jewish woman, who is married to a Jew. So that comes to include this category as well. The Katani Sefa, Ba'al Arayot Yisrael, Nidon Bedine Yisrael. And in fact, the continuation of that Braita says that if a non-Jew has relations with a Jewish woman, that is a prohibited relation, then they are judged according to Jewish law. And that would be different consequences, different punishments, and different procedure for Jewish law. So ish does come to include a non-Jew, but only a non-Jew who commits a sin with a Jew who is adjudicated in a Jewish court according to Jewish law. Lemay hilcheta amar Rav Nachman bar Abba bar Abu lo nisrached ala eda ve'edim ve'hatra'a. Now, what would be the practical implication of that? Rav Nachman says, name of Rabba bar Avu, that the implication would be regarding how many judges do you need. So if it's a Jew that commits adultery with so if it's a non-Jew that commits adultery with a non-Jew, then they would only need one judge. But if a non-Jew with a Jew, then 23 judges. And the same thing with witnesses. For a non-Jew is only one. But if it's in a Jewish court, they require two. And for warning, a non-Jew with a non-Jew in a non-Jewish court would not need a warning. But if a non-Jew sinned with a Jewish woman who was married, then they would need warning. Now we ask, Migra Gara, this would be very strange, because that would mean that the law of a Jew who commits adultery, a non-Jew commits adultery with a non-Jew, would be less stringent than if a non-Jew committed adultery with a Jew. Because if a non-Jew committed adultery with a Jew, then they'd probably get off the hook, because you need two witnesses, and you need a warning, and you need 23 judges. And that's all part of that procedure of trying to find leniency. And it's hard to get all those things. So likely they would not get killed. Whereas a non-Jew commits adultery with another non-Jew, you don't need any warning or just one witness. So they probably would get killed. So does that make sense that it should be less stringent in this case? Rather, Rabbi Yochanan says, now, the difference between these two Pesukim, when it says in Bereshit, that's talking about in their courts, their Adayot, and Pasuk Ishis is talking about our Adayot and our courts. What would be a practical difference between them? It would be Na'ara Me'orasa. Non-Jews don't have a concept of Na'ara Me'orasa. Only in Jewish law do you have two steps, Erusin and then Kiddushin. So you can have a Na'ara, a young girl who's 12, between 12 and 12 and a half, and she's Me'orasa. So if a non-Jew committed adultery with a Na'ara Me'orasa, since they don't have that category in a non-Jewish court, that would be adjudicated in a Jewish court according to Jewish law. All right. But if a non-Jew committed adultery with a Jewish woman who's fully married, then that would be adjudicated in the non-Jewish court. So now we ask about Rabbi Yochanan. So you're telling me that Eshet Ish, if a non-Jew committed adultery with a fully married Jewish woman, then that would go to the non-Jewish court? Is that true? There's a braita that says if a non-Jew has relations with Na'ara Me'orasa, they'll be judged by Sikila. That makes sense, because that's in a Jewish court. Anyone who was with a Na'ara Me'orasa is in fact biskila. So, and that would include a Jew and also a non-Jew, because that's in a Jewish court. And if a non-Jew had relations with Eshet Ish, with a Jewish woman who's fully married to a Jew, then the punishment is chenek. Now, that should not be the punishment, because if it was in their court, then it should be saif. This is the opinion according to Rabbanan, against Tana Debe Menashe that we saw earlier and is about to come again, that says on all non-Jews who get capital punishment or get chenek. That's only their opinion. The opinion of Rabbanan, of the majority, is actually that in a non-Jewish court you'd get saif, whereas in a Jewish court, for Eshet Ish, one gets chenek. So therefore, this baraita is a problem for Rabbi Yochanan, because if it's Eshet Ish, and in fact Eshet Ish is done in a non-Jewish court, then it should be saif, beheading. That's the standard punishment in the non-Jewish court for Misvot B'nei Noach. And when it says chenek, that's actually in a Jewish court. So it looks like even Eshet Ish is done in a Jewish court according to this baraita, against Rabbi Yochanan, who says no, it's only different for Na'ara Me'orasa. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Mai Eshet Ish tekatane, kegon shenichnesa lechupa velo nib'ala delididhu letlehu daininan lehu bedina didan. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak comes to answer this question. He says, what does the phrase eshet ish mean in this baraita when it says eshet ish nidon bechenek? Oh, that's talking about a case where this Jewish couple had a chuppah. They had a wedding ceremony, and he brought his new kala into his home, and so they had yichud and all that, but they never actually consummated the marriage with intercourse. And in such a case, in non-Jewish law, they don't have such a concept. That is called not married at all. Whereas in Jewish law, that is the same as married, even if they did not do so, even if they did not consummate, and therefore that is called adultery. So therefore, since this woman, this non-Jew, had relations with this bride, who got married, in fact, but did not consummate the marriage, and they don't have that in their courts, so we judge that in our courts. And that's what it's talking about when it says eshet ish bechenek. This is done in a Jewish court. That's why it says bechenek, because it was talking about this case where they don't have such a thing. So in fact, nada me'orasa and eshet ish, both of these examples in this baraita are done in a Jewish court. But if it was a regular eshet ish, someone who was fully married and consummated the marriage and all that, then in fact it would be saif in their court. And so now we save the day for Rabbi Yochanan. Tetane Rabbi Chanina beulat baal yesh lahen nichnesa lechuppah velo nib'ala en lahen. And we know that this is true, that there is such a distinction between Jewish and non-Jewish law, because Braita Rabbi Chanina teaches that beulat baal, a couple who actually consummated their marriage, that is also such a concept in non-Jewish law, that when non-Jews recognize wedding when it's consummated. But if they only entered the canopy, did the ceremony and all that, and even generally the wedding would probably be done in this home that the husband built, and she would enter into it. And so all that without consummating the marriage, that is not found in non-Jewish law, but is found in Jewish law. So this distinction makes sense. Tanya kevated Rabbi Yochanan. We have a baraita that supports what Rabbi Yochanan said. Kol erva shebetin shel Yisrael memitin aleha ben noach muzhar aleha. Any case of forbidden relations that a Jewish court would kill someone based on that, a non-Jew also is prohibited in such a case. En betin shel Yisrael memitin aleha en ben noach muzhar aleha. Divrei Rabbi Meir. But if a Jewish court would not kill someone about that, then a non-Jewish court, non-Jews are not prohibited in such an act, according to the Meir. Hachamim omrim harbe arayot yesh she'en bet din shel Yisrael memitin alehen uben noach muzhar alehen. Hachamim say that's not true. There are many cases of forbidden relations that a Jewish court would not kill someone about, but ben noach is prohibited. So there are cases where ben noach is actually more stringent. Ba'al arayot Yisrael nidon bedinei Yisrael. If a non-Jew has relations with a Jew, forbidden relations, then it is judged in a Jewish court. Ba'al arayot ben Noach nidon bedine ben Noach. Whereas a non-Jew has relations with another non-Jew and it's a forbidden relation, then they are judged in a non-Jewish court. V'anu en lanu ela nara me'orasa bilbad. The proof for Rabbi Yochanan is from the last section of the Baraita. The first two sections was a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says that we only kill a non-Jew if a Jew would be killed for those forbidden relationships, whereas if it's an isur karet for a Jew, then a non-Jew is not prohibited in such relations at all. Whereas Chachamim say, no, there are many cases where one would not be killed in a Jewish court because a Jew with a Jew would only get karet, but a non-Jew actually is prohibited and would get capital punishment for that. So Achamim are more stringent in Bnei Noach than Rabbi Meir. But here again, the main point is from here where it says that Jews will get judged in Jewish court and non-Jews in non-Jewish court, and there's one difference. The one difference is if a non-Jew has relations with a na'ara me'orasa, since that category category does not exist in a non-Jewish court. So usually usually non-Jews who commit a sin would be judged in a non-Jewish court according to Misvot B'nai Noach. However, since they don't have such a category of Na'adam or Asa, they would come to a Jewish court and get Sekila. Now we ask, how come in this Baraita doesn't also include the case of a Jewish couple who has the wedding ceremony and a chuppah, but they don't consummate the marriage, where also, since that's not a concept in non-Jewish court, they would have to go and be judged in a Jewish court? And the answer is, Hay Tana de Ben Menashehu damar kol mitam mura libnei Noach eno ela chenek. Idi v'idi cheneku. Oh, the author of this Baraita is the Tana of Ben Menashe, who says that every capital punishment that's given to Bnei Noach is always chenek. And since this is a case of eshet ish, of a married woman in a Jewish court, the punishment would also be chenek. So since the punishment is chenek either way, whether you go to a Jewish court or a non-Jewish court, there is no difference. So that's why it didn't mention this as a distinction, and it only mentions Na'adam or Asa. Baruch Adonai La'olam. Amen ve'amen.